Thank you all for joining us here tonight at the exhibit opening For the People. KU Libraries celebrates 150 years of publicly accessible government information. I am always amazed at several things about the government printing and Federal Depository Library program. The first is that it is open to everybody. The United States, I'm a copyright lawyer, so you have to indulge me for a minute. The United States is one of the very few countries in the world where there are no legal restrictions on the reuse of government information. There is no crown copyright. So that's one of the remarkable things about government information, is that it is available to everybody to access and to use in any way they want. Another remarkable thing is the system of repository libraries. There is a federal depository library in every state. It's established by law. KU is Kansas's federal depository library. That is, we collect all of the government information, everything they tell us to collect, which is a lot. And then the last thing that amazes me about this is the vast array of topics. The diversity of information that you can find in the government printing program is truly amazing, and that's one of the things you'll see as you browse the exhibit tonight. So we're very honored to be part of this program. We have been, as the title of our exhibit says, a government repository for 150 years. We are also fortunate at KU to have extremely knowledgeable professionals in government information who provide support to everybody who needs assistance in searching and understanding these materials. The Federal Depository at KU has been making a difference for Kansans and for the nation for more than 150 years, and we really look forward to continuing that tradition. I'd like to take a moment to recognize several individuals who contributed to this evening. First, I want to thank all of our KU Libraries faculty and staff for their support of this exhibit. And if your faculty, I was going to ask the faculty and staff to stand up, and please do, but most of them are already standing in the back. Well, I need to stand up. It truly is an honor for me to work with the extraordinary people in the KU Libraries. And speaking of extraordinary people, we're very grateful for Sarah Goodwin-Thiel and the Harricombe Gallery. I can't find Sarah now, but she's right in front of me, of course. And the Harricombe Gallery Exhibits Advisory Board, Samantha Bishop-Simmons and Conrad Mulkey, for the hard work that they've done in curating this exhibit. One of the things people don't realize if they don't do this is how much effort, how much thought goes into curating an exhibit of any kind, but especially when you have a tremendous variety and sheer amount of materials to choose from, as you do when you're celebrating government information, and you have to fit the exhibit into that space. It is truly a remarkable feat. I also want to recognize Neil Axton, who is our current government documents librarian, Carmen Orth-Alfie. Carmen, hi Carmen. Carmen Orth-Alfie is our former government documents librarian. And Scott McKeithrick, who is the map specialist. I know I saw Scott.
Over here.
Over there. All the way over there. You were all the way over here before. Scott McKeithrick is our map specialist and the head of the Center for Graduate Student Engagement. They served as the content providers for this exhibit, and thanks to each of you for your efforts. Additionally, we are honored to have Eric Norris, our state librarian, join us tonight. Eric is back there with his wife Tammy. Welcome and thank you for being here. I am also especially pleased to introduce Donna Kemp, former head of government document and map libraries at KU, and I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Donna, so I'm looking for her. Possibly in vain. Okay, thank you. So the main event, besides the exhibit tonight, is the panelists, and I'd like to introduce tonight's panel moderator. Reggie Robinson, who is KU's Vice Chancellor for Public Affairs. Reggie has served in a number of senior positions with the Department of Justice in Washington and was a White House Fellow and Special Assistant to Attorney General Janet Reno during the Clinton administration. For tonight's panel on the topic, I'll get this right, excuse me. The topic for tonight's panel will be congressional hearings, and each of our panelists has served as witnesses for congressional hearings. Our panelists are Kathryn Tuttle, Associate Vice Provost Emerita, Donna Ginther, Director of the Center for Science, Technology, and Economic Policy and Professor of Economics, Lester Randall, Kickapoo Tribal Chairman, and Michael McGrew, CEO of McGrew Real Estate. So thank you all for being here. We're looking forward to hearing from you tonight. And now I'll turn it over to Reggie.
Thank you, Gary. Get myself perched up here. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here, for braving the impending weather to spend some time tonight. I'm really impressed that almost all the chairs are filled, and I'm looking forward to a good conversation tonight. You heard a little bit about my background. I have the pleasure and honor of serving as KU's Vice Chancellor for Public Affairs, but in a past life, I had the opportunity both at the federal and state level to be in positions where I was called upon to serve as a witness. We call them conferees in state government for some reason, but in federal government, congressional committees as a witness. And so I bring that perspective to this conversation tonight. We're going to talk about this process of serving as a congressional hearing witness. As I entitled the panel, you heard Kevin describe it. For me, this is congressional hearings, a view from the witness table, right? And we have a chance to hear tonight from 4 people who have had the opportunity to sort of sit in that chair behind the table and present views to policymakers at the federal level. But before we turn to some questions that I'm going to pose for the panelists, a little bit of background I think makes some sense. First, the format for tonight. I've got a real challenge because it's about 6:17. I think we're going to try to go until about 7-ish. We've got 4 panel members. I've got a series of questions, 4 or so, and then we also want to leave time for Q&A from the audience. So my panelists are now being advised to keep your responses crisp and short. You heard me say it, and so remember whether they follow that admonition. And we'll try to get through as much as we can. If we get to about 10 till 7 or so, and I still have questions to go to, I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to you all for some questions. So you'll be saving those up as you think about things that you want to ask these folks. But a little bit of background. Funny to say, but congressional hearings really were, at one point in our history, really for the early part of our history, relatively rare. Between the Civil War, for example, and the beginning of the 20th century, think about that time span, fewer than 100 such hearings were held every year. Now, you don't know what that means when I just give you that raw number, but to put it in context, by 1972, the 92nd Congress had itself conducted 2,000 hearings. And so this sort of hearing culture is a relatively new phenomenon for us. Now, for many of us, certain high-profile congressional hearings sort of serve as key milestones that we've passed on roads that we've traveled in our own individual efforts to follow political and public affairs. For those of us of a certain age, perhaps it was the Joe McCarthy hearings that captured our attention initially. For others, and I put myself in this category, it was the Watergate hearings that really sort of drew our attention. For others still, it might have been hearings related to the Iran-Contra controversy. And of course, more recently, you might have been among those riveted by former FBI Director James Comey's congressional hearing testimony. But those investigative hearings are really just one variation on the congressional hearing theme. There are also oversight hearings, and through those hearings, committees of the Congress are really seeking to inform themselves about whether an already enacted law is being implemented properly, right? But finally, a final category, and the one that I think we're going to spend time talking about tonight, so this is the most important category for our purposes, there are what you might call legislative or bill hearings. And in these hearings, we've got congressional committees that are really aiming to do one of two broad things, right? They're trying to inform themselves, the members of the committee are, about the need for lawmaking action in a particular subject matter area. So they're trying to just inform themselves about a policy area, a particular area. They want to have people come in and talk about a topic with the eye toward maybe taking legislative steps in that area down the road. Or they're trying to inform themselves and gather views about a piece of pending legislation that the committee is considering. Those legislative hearings, by the way, you should know, are by invitation only, by the rule. There really is no sort of general opportunity for you and I to just decide that a particular hearing looks like it would be interesting, and so we can go and sign up and make sure that that committee hears our views. That's really not how it works. The committee hearing processes are generally structured so that the committee is exposed to competing points of view. The majority party will typically have the opportunity to call more witnesses favorable toward its view than the minority party, which will have a fewer number of hearing testimony slots to fill. So that's the general framework for how these work. Okay, so what is it like to play a role in this process as a witness? And for those insights, we'll turn to our panel. Now Kevin introduced them, and so I won't redo that. But let's welcome our panel, please. And the way that I've thought about the questions that I want to pose for the panel, really sort of in three categories, and we'll see whether we get through all of them. But I want to talk first about the prelude, right? And so sort of, and this is the first set of questions that I'll ask them. How did it come to be that you were invited to serve as a witness before a hearing, a congressional hearing group? How did you prepare for that? Just all of the prelude that was a part of your experience. So that'll be the first set of questions, maybe just one or two, around prelude. And then a second set of questions around process, what was it like? And then finally, a set of questions sort of reflecting back on the experience. And mainly, would you do it again if you had the opportunity? So let's start with that, with the prelude questions. First, you've got the microphone.
I got the mic. How about
so,
that?
How did it come to be that you were in this
How
role?
about that? Can you hear me okay
Yes.
back there? Hi, I'm Kathryn Tuttle. I was mentioning that I was probably the least distinguished person on this panel, but I did get to be a witness before the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, Committee on Financial Services, the U.S. House of Representatives. This was in 2010, so how did I even remember the name of that government document? So it's wonderful. I actually did have a copy of my report that I did. And this was held at the Dole Institute in August of 2010. So I like this whole notion of the field hearing that they came to us. And I hear that the Kansas Supreme Court is going to be having a hearing here in Lawrence, right, later this year. So that's very exciting. And so I that opportunity. But remember, back to 2008, what was the big news of 2008?
Session.
The financial crisis. And so this hearing was related to that financial crisis, and it was chaired by a subcommittee that was chaired by our representative from the Kansas City area, Dennis Moore, that many of you may remember, and included Representative Lynn Jenkins, and Emmanuel Cleaver was also on this committee. Barney Frank chaired the overall committee. He was not in attendance, but that gives you a sense of some of this concern about the financial stability of the country. And they were interested in getting back at the root, like what was happening with education and financial literacy, really not only K-12 through higher education, but also adults. As I looked at the document again, they were really concerned about how adults made decisions about mortgages or about all these kinds of things. So The title of the session was Empowering Consumers, Can Financial Literacy Education Prevent Another Financial Crisis? And so why I was asked was because that very summer before, I had helped to establish the I'm getting the titles mixed up here, Student Money Management Services at KU, which was the first separate office that was to help students with their budgets, with understanding their financial expenses, looking at their student loan debt, which is a huge issue, as you all know. So it was the first office at KU that was really founded separately to help counsel students about their financial lives and to educate them in the classroom. So I told them about that program. We had just literally opened the office the week before the hearing. So it was very good timing, and we could tell them at least what we were doing for the students at KU.
Mike?
Well, so my opportunity to testify was in March of 2018. So mine's a little, and by the way, if you're really bored, apparently every time you testify now, they keep it, and it is on YouTube. So I don't recommend. I've not gone and watched it, but I understand it's there. So I testified before the House Education and Workforce Subcommittee for the hearing, and the title of the hearing was Expanding Affordable Health Care Options, Examining the Department of Labor's Proposed Rule on Association Health Plans. Now, you might rightly be asking yourself, why is a realtor interested in something like this, and do I have any expertise in the matter? And the answer is no, I do not. But I had been very recently at that time the past treasurer of the National Association of Realtors, and so I was familiar with the issue, and in fact had been, we call them federal political coordinators for Senator Roberts some 8 years before, when association health plans made it to the Senate and lost by one vote, did not pass. And so I was vaguely familiar with the issue. The National Association of Realtors reached out to me and asked me if I'd be willing to testify. The point of the subcommittee and the Bureau, how we were trying to inform the Bureau of Labor, Department of Labor, was they were rewriting the definition, among other things, of what a company was. In other words, a sole proprietor, owner-operator, would be considered a company, and that has not been the case up until now. I was asked by the majority party to kind of represent small business in the realtor family, if you will. There were 3 witnesses on the pros on that side, and then there was one on the opposing side. And in fact, I guess the testimony went rather well, and ultimately the Bureau of Labor did, in fact, change the rule the way we wanted them to, and subsequently were sued by 13 attorneys generals, and so it hasn't happened. But it was, so it was the National Association of Realtors that reached out to me and asked me to do that, and there you have it.
Thanks, Mike. Lester?
Well, if you guys really want to know how you got to testify, you get 5 minutes. They sit you in front of a box, and ours was on Senate Bill 2154 is what I was testifying for, and that's our water rights that we negotiated with the state first, and we have to have it ratified by Congress in order for it to become a law. So when I've been on the council 13 years, and then the last 5 years I've been chairman for our tribe. So I've been progressing, learning a lot of history about where we came from and where we were at today. And you have to know that stuff when you go there, because it's not the 5 minutes of talking, because they have your written. So it's the 5 minutes that you get to talk about. It's the questions afterwards. So the questions afterwards is the main thing. I'm being able to answer those questions precisely and diligently, because you have to be right on. So, I mean, you have to know what you're talking about when you're up there, and if you ever go and get the opportunity, always take, I always say you're not as good as unless your team is as good as you are. So, I mean, so take good people with you, because you can ask the chairman. If you can't answer that question, you can ask the chairman the guy behind you can answer that question if you don't know it. Just like I was talking GIS back here, and some of them questions get pretty technical. I mean, especially with water rights, and you got your hydrologist. I mean, people like me, we don't know that. So I mean, you have the people behind you that can help you answer the questions. That helps out a lot. As with the specifics of it, they have your written testimony, and there's a lot of back of it. Like mine was a book. So I mean, you get 5 minutes to talk about that book. You have to pick very specific parts out that mean something to you, and you know it thoroughly. So that's pretty much how you kind of get into it at the very beginning. But I think you got more questions for us.
I do.
Donna? Remember, you only get 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I was asked to testify before the Subcommittee on Research, Science, and Education of the Committee of Science Technology of the U.S. House of Representatives in 2008 on the bill Fulfilling the Potential of Women in Academic Science and Engineering Act of 2008. This bill did not get passed into law, but I was able to testify, and I had a week. So I got an email from a staff member of the Representative Vern Ehlers from Michigan. I had a week to write testimony and then go present it. And at the time, I had a 1-year-old daughter, and I was still breastfeeding, so I had my breast pump with me to go testify. And Congresswoman Jenkins gave me a closet to use to take care of that. So you write your testimony, and then you get questions from the panel. So it's a quick turnaround in terms of working on the topic that they asked you to talk about. And luckily for me, it was based on my research. So that's how they found me, and that's how I came to testify.
Thank you. Quick follow-up questions. You wrote your testimony. Did people help you all write your testimony, or was that something you just had to take on to do
I
so?
just took it on, but
Okay.
I got help from governmental relations, so and they gave me some tips on how to keep it concise and how to testify in a concise manner.
I wrote the original draft of mine, but NAR knew the statistics that they were wanting to put in there, and so they definitely polished it up a little bit.
And how much? Oh, go ahead, Lester.
I paid a lot of really good lawyers and a lot of good researchers.
Now, you had a week.
Right.
How much time did you have between the invitation and then the need to be?
Not too much. It was probably maybe a couple weeks, but it wasn't that long.
I think for me, it took longer. This won't surprise my friends in the audience. It took longer for them to vet me and approve me.
Of course.
To me, because you fill out, and I brought it. You have a whole bunch of stuff that you send them along with your resume, and then they decide if you're qualified to sit in front of them. So that took about a week, and there's politics involved. They want to know, what party you are and whatever else, and then you get about working on the testimony.
Now, Lester, you talked a little bit about what the experience is like. Donna, let's turn to that now for you. Just create a picture, if you can, of what that experience was like for you. Were there many members of the committee present? Did you have 5 minutes only, like Lester did? Did you get follow-up questions? Were there other panelists? Just sort of what was the setting like when you went through the process?
Oh, it was a hearing room, and they were sitting up. I mean, I was sitting down at a table, looking up at like about 5 members of the committee and giving my testimony. And so I gave about a 5-minute testimony. And then after that, there were follow-up questions. And the thing for my testimony, I got this NSF grant in 2004. And a representative of the National Science Foundation was sitting next to me, and I had been fighting with her for 4 years over getting access to data. By the way, I'm still waiting for that access to that data. And I had the opportunity to throw her under the bus But I thought I shouldn't do that, so I called my program officer at NSF, and he gave me the language that I could use to let the House committee know that these data were really important without, really impugning her. And thankfully she retired and we moved forward on this project, but it's still not done. But you sit there and then they ask you lots of questions and you try to give them honest answers about, from your personal, because it was based on my research, so my research suggests that the following would be a good policy.
Mr. anything you want to add to what the process was like? Yeah, go ahead.
When testifying in front of the Senate is obviously different than testifying before the House and testifying before the state. So I've done all three, and all three was different experiences because, of course, when you get to the Senate, that's the highest up that I was able to speak at, and oh man, there was probably 12, I think, 12 on the panel. So it was almost full. So it was pretty. It gets kind of intimidating when you're sitting there looking at the people that you get to watch all the time. But just the best thing you can do is remember they're people just like you, and they understand just like you and think just like you. So you talk to them just like it's like I'm talking to you guys. So that's the way I always taught. Just speak from your heart and let it out. That's pretty much what I did there, and hopefully it goes through. And now I did testify for the Senate Bill 2154, and I can't recall the House Bill number, but we have a House Bill number on that same part, Senator Moran and Senator Jenkins. But I think my 5 minutes up. So.
Okay, good, thanks. Mike, what was the process like for you?
So so the night before I didn't sleep, of course, and then they bring you in an hour or so before the meeting, and you're in the back with the staff, and they tell you how it's going to work and kind of prepare you for the whole thing. When you actually go in and sit down, the gravity of it was not lost on me. I felt I was very proud to be there. Intimidated is a good word as well. And but there were 22 members, I think, of this subcommittee that were there, and so they weren't all there when it started. And then after they got a chance to grandstand, which is what they all do, they ask questions. We gave our little 5 minutes each of testimony. Well, that's 20 minutes out of a 2-hour hearing. The next hour and 40 minutes is them asking a question by telling you what they think. And they spend 4 minutes and 50 seconds asking, and then you have however much time left to answer. And so I came away feeling like it was scripted theater. And you knew who was going to ask you what. You knew who was friendly and who wasn't. The funniest thing that happened to me, which kind of put it all in perspective, was one of the congresswomen from Florida that was not at all in favor of this, and you knew it because you knew it completely the whole time, asked me a question that she intended to ask of her witness. She asked it of me. And so my answer to her, and she was reading the question. They don't look at you. They read what the question is as they're saying what they say. And then she looked up and I said, well, I'm really not an expert in that. And she went and looked at her staff and they went, she asked the wrong person the wrong question. But then which gave me a chance to actually answer it the way I wanted to, and it worked out okay. But it was an intimidating deal to get started for sure.
Well, I was in the friendly confines of the Dole Institute, so it was a different environment, and I believe there might have been some guests there. That's my memory, but is that possible, Reggie? I mean, in terms of this closed hearing, I don't think it was. I don't know if these field hearings are different, but it seemed to me other than there were. There were several state officials like Sandy Prager and others that were there to testify. When I was reading my testimony again the other day, it brought me back to that era when there was still so much concern about the financial stability of the United States and what had happened and how we got there. And I remember kind of a tension between Representative Moore and Representative Jenkins about individual responsibility for the financial crisis as opposed to governmental responsibility or third-party responsibility. So there's discussion on that level of who really made this mess and who's responsible for it and what can we do about it. But there's no doubt that financial literacy. We did a survey of KU students, and there was a financial literacy competence scale with the high score being 6 and the low score being 1. And KU students were at 3. I mean, their knowledge of these issues, and I think still is quite a concern, that they really don't know the implications when they take out the loans that they take out, even though we have a great financial aid office that tries to help them. But there's still, I think, a concern about that, and that was very much expressed at that meeting.
I should have asked this at the beginning. Before you did this, had you watched congressional hearing testimony on television or in person? Occasionally?
I've watched it in person.
Yeah. You watch it? No?
McCarthy. I saw McCarthy, but McCarthy.
All right. And another question I should have asked you.
Have you no shame?
Have you no James? A question I should have asked you up front, why did you say yes when you were approached to do this?
I was talking to someone at the reception that reminded me a little bit of when completely different environment, but when I was on a jury duty here in Douglas County. I mean, you really, when you go to vote, that you are exercising your responsibilities as a citizen, and you don't feel that all the time. And so I really enjoyed that part of it, of just being part of a governmental process and being able to contribute.
I would absolutely agree with that. And I also, the subject of my testimony mattered to me. It was, even though I'm not expert in it, I certainly feel the pain of, 40% of real estate agents don't have health insurance, not through their employer, they get it through their spouse if they have it at all. And so anything that I could do to move that ball forward and give people more options was something that I cared to try to do.
Mine was more like an honorary thing. I'm an elected position, so my people will look for me I'm the voice of our people, so that's kind of why I had to get up there and do it. I've done it several times since, so. And I mean, it's a great accomplishment, not just for me, but to move our people forward, because you have to get out there and let your voice be heard, or just don't go nowhere.
Why did you say yes, Donna?
Well, it was about my research, and I thought it was an opportunity to perhaps influence policy based on my research findings. So it seemed natural.
Okay. I've got a couple more questions, so you need to be baking your questions out there because I'll be turning to you pretty soon. Mike, you said that a part of the sentiment or the feeling that you experienced as you were sitting there at that hearing table was this sense of scripted theater. The rest of you have a similar feeling about what you were sitting through, or not so much? There
Not
was a
so much
criticism
because
about
we
these
were in a
hearings
more
this
home
week.
basis, I think, so I didn't have that perspective
Okay.
or sense that it was scripted.
I'm just going to say I agree with him.
Okay.
It wasn't really that scripted.
Okay.
They wanted information.
Even if you thought it was scripted theater, did you feel as though you were making some sort of meaningful contribution to the policy-making process, to the legislative decision-making process, as you played that role sitting there at that table in the hearing? So whether you felt it was scripted or not, did you feel like you were doing something that mattered?
Of course, I mean, you wouldn't be there if you didn't. The part being scripted, I mean, the senators or the House representatives, they're looking at a set of questions set for specific people at specific times. And they come back with several following questions behind that you may or not know them questions before. Some of them questions I knew were coming because obviously Senator Moran was the one to introduce my bill, so he asked me some questions that I knew that were coming, stuff like that.
a pawn is still important in a chess game. And I sort of felt like I was a pawn, but I needed to move in the right places the right way in order to have the game go the way we wanted it to.
Yeah.
This is my last question. Given all that you've shared, and thanks for the perspectives that you've given us in the time that we've had, would you do it again?
Absolutely. In fact, when I was treasurer, I was disappointed. So I was treasurer for the National Association for 3 years, and I didn't get an opportunity to testify. And in fact, I told Representative Jenkins and some others that I always wanted to do that and see what it was like and see if I could get through it. And so I absolutely was pleased to do it and would certainly do it again, assuming it was an issue that I was interested in.
Yes, absolutely, and I think the whole concept of these field meetings is ones that I hope will continue to happen and be expanded, because it gives an opportunity for the representatives to be in the place and hear it, and I think it's very important.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm gonna have to do it again.
It's not an open question for you.
Yeah, within probably a few months, I'll have to end up doing it.
I've had to do it again twice on 2 other occasions. I testified before the Federal Commission on Evidence-Based Policy, and then Representative, who is now Senator McSally, had a working group on the future of women in the American workforce. And again, I had like a week to come up with something important to say.
Thank you, panelists, for indulging my questions and really providing some very crisp responses. Thank you very much. Now it's your turn. We'll start here. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My question is for Dr. Ginther, although anybody could answer if this was also their experience. My name is Samantha Bishop Simmons, and I'm on the advisory board for the exhibit. And one of the things I was tasked with doing was finding relevant scholarship. And so when I went to look up your testimony, most of the references that I found were through science.gov. But repeatedly, through multiple different iterations of the website, when I clicked on the testimony to download it to include in our case, it had been removed, or it said that it was not found. And ultimately, I ended up accessing the script through KU itself, through mentions of your work. Have you, in particular, ever checked to see how accessible these are? And if so, have you noticed them being removed at any point? I did a little bit of research and saw that some things had been removed from science.gov by the current administration, but it was sort of vague if it was just several unlucky broken links or if your testimony had been removed on purpose. And I just wanted to know if you knew anything about that.
Well, I wasn't aware that it had been removed. I thought it would be, once it goes up on the web, I assume it stays there forever.
It mentions it, but then when it says click here to read, when you click on it, it says access forbidden. So.
Oh, interesting. Well, I found it on my computer. So.
It's at KU in our library.
And I emailed it to myself on my phone so I could read the name of the committee. So no, I wasn't aware that that had been removed. I know that there was a videotape of the testimony before the working group on women a couple of years ago that's up on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that some of it's been removed.
Mm-hmm.
Or did anybody else have any take on that?
Go to YouTube. I think you can watch it.
Dawn, go ahead.
I could add something really quick.
Go ahead.
In case you didn't know, anytime Congress switches power, so when the House switches from Democratic power to Republican power, the majority gets to take over the websites for the committees. And then they have to have links to the minority. And so sometimes, well, every time it switches, all the links go away. So, but in our collection, we would have the written testimony because these particular ones were all for official committees. The caucuses and other kinds of things, we don't have those in our collection.
Dawn.
I don't know if all of you had lobbyists appealing for your issue. I know some of you may. But if there were lobbyists, did you have a feeling that the lobbyists were before you or after you or on both sides of you, and were you just superfluous, or were they really just listening to the lobby?
Who wants to take that one, or at least for a shot?
There are no lobbyists for my testimony.
Yeah, mine was more of a political football, we do have, NAR's got lots of lobbyists, and in fact, I mentioned each representative and senator have a federal political coordinator who is a realtor in their district that is charged with taking care of relationships with them. So yeah, we've been working this issue for a long time. The panelists were not at all, because the committee did not want to hear from the lobbyists. They wanted to hear from real people at that time. One of them was, I'm trying to remember, the other one that I was most impressed with, she was the CEO of of a small business group for people that have franchisees of America. She was the CEO for them, so she wasn't exactly small, but she represented a lot of small business owners, and that was the perspective that the committee wanted at that point. Nope.
See any other hands? Yes.
So my question is, did you find yourself being a little more politically engaged at a local or state level after having this experience?
I can't say that I did directly related to this. I mean, I guess the issues of financial literacy and student indebtedness have remained an ongoing concern to me. Just last week, there was the watchdog report from the U.S. Department of Education, talking about third-party processors of student loans who've been misinforming students. So that concern has continued. So on that level, yeah, I guess it's kept me engaged with student financial indebtedness and literacy issues.
So I mentioned being a federal political coordinator. I'm also, in fact, tomorrow, if the weather permits, I'm going to a meeting in California where it's the political action committee for the National Association of Realtors. We got a couple of senators coming to talk to us, and if you're in real estate, if you're a realtor, politics is a big deal in a lot of ways, and we typically attract politically active people into the business to some degree. You might be interested to know that if you look up who the PAC contributes to, you might think you know who it is. The last go-round at the end of 2018, I believe it was 51.5% went to Republicans and 48.5% went to Democrats. We are not interested in anything other than what moves private property rights forward. Whichever party wants to help us, we don't care.
Nothing else on that one? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I might just offer more of a comment than a question, and it's on that conversation about missing testimony and broken links, and just so everybody knows, the Library of Congress is actually the official repository for all congressional testimony, so that when the links actually change for majority to minority in the committee's own repositories, switch hands, the Library of Congress is actually tasked with all of those records. So I can't remember what the website is, but if you just look up Thomas Library of Congress, Thomas is the search engine for all the committee documents. And so I wouldn't want anybody to think that it wasn't findable in terms of the exact form. Obviously, you can watch it on YouTube too, but if you want to read the documents or download anything, including any follow-up document with the committee request, you can get it through the library.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Sarah.
Well, I just have one question. First of all, thank you to all of you guys for being here and talking about your experience. You had said, Reggie asked you the question about saying yes to doing this. I asked the question of why didn't you say no? I mean, it seems terrifying to me to be invited to speak before Congress. So I'm so impressed, really, with everybody that you just saw this as your role and you did it. But it had to be a really scary experience, I would think.
We said yes to you too.
Talk about scary, right?
Sarah's pretty scary. I wonder if there was a moment when you thought, I can't do this, or did you was it an opportunity for your feeling to take a step and move towards, your issue or your country or whatever it was that made you feel that this was really important to you? But it seems like for me, it's a bigger question, because I think it's incredible that people do this, serve as witnesses. It seems like a huge responsibility.
I'll give you a little example of that. The House of Representatives, I testified in front of them. The first time I ever testified was in front of the House, and never done it before. I was pretty young. I think I started when I was on the council when I was 28, so I was pretty young. And when I got there, I had my testimony, and then I was talking to some lobbyist and stuff that he was talking about, and they said, "Yeah, you have 5 minutes to read this." So I went back to my room, and I had a couple lawyers with me and a couple, publicists with me, and they were typing away. As I talked, they would type it, and I had to get this book down to 5 minutes, and that was probably the most vigorous thing I ever done in my life, because I'm like trying to figure out how I'm going to say 5 minutes worth of my testimony that I want to get out there, and they have different strategies on how to do your testimony, and the testimony that they printed out for me was right on. I mean, I hit right on at 5 minutes. It was pretty cool, but that was my blocking point. I was like, there's no way I can read this in 5 minutes. And then obviously lawyers and some publicists have some different ideas, so you have to have that experience around you to get through it. So,
Other thoughts on that one?
Well, what I'd always tell my students is act as if. So you just go in there and act as if you know what you're doing, and it usually works out.
Ditto.
The first time I did a testimony was in DC, and I didn't have an option. For me, it was a part of my job, sort of presenting the government position on something that was pending, the DOJ's position, the Clinton administration's position, and I was not supposed to be the one to do it. It sort of fell into my lap because people who were supposed to do it had conflicts, and I was terrified. And the first thought that I had was that for so long, I'm a sort of C-SPAN junkie. I have been for a long time, and I actually remember even when I was a congressional intern back when I was in college. One of my first impressions when I went to a legislative hearing on Capitol Hill, I was miffed because I walked into the hearing and like fewer than half of them were there, right? I came to understand why that is so, but my first impression was, oh my gosh, where are they? This is their job, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward, I have to go do this testimony. I'm sort of nervous. I was so glad that there were hardly any of them there. And so it's interesting what your perspective is and how it can change. Other questions? Yes, Dave.
Do you have any sense that your testimony or others who were testifying changed anybody's opinion? Or was this truly kind of show place?
it's a great question. I'd like you to answer that.
Did you have a sense? Could you? Did you have a sense or
like
no?
you said, not everybody's there that's on the
Right.
on the panel. I mean, everybody that's in that committee is not there, so you don't know where their opinion are. And the ones that are there, probably a third of them ask you questions. So I mean,
The interesting thing is, once they ask you the question, they leave. So they're once you answer it, then they're not interested in hearing it. Their staff does it. The subcommittee staff does it. I'm not saying it didn't work, and it's probably an opportunity to screw it up, maybe more than get it across the goal line. But like I said, I think ponds have roles to play too, and it was all part of a plan to try and get this to the right place where the Bureau of Labor would do what they did, and then they knew it was going to be challenged in court, which it was. So.
one other thing I would add. One of the other thing I would add to that is sometimes, like on one of my bills, there was four other bills being introduced that day. So when one of them senators when this person would give their testimony, they would ask questions, and if that was the bill that they were wanting to listen to, like he said, they would leave, and then you were dealing with the ones that were wanting to listen to your testimony. So they do several bills at several times.
I'm not aware of me changing any minds.
My experience, I guess the times when I've had opportunities to testify when I was in DC, I guess that was not my objective. And my objective was perhaps to at least plant a seed for, if I was testifying about something that we opposed, plant a seed that would make a supporter amenable to an amendment that would make the bill more palatable for us. It was really my objective was to sort of generate and confirm the support of the people that were already on our position, but then maybe around the edges to create opportunities for adjusting or amending the position or the legislation at issue to make it slightly better for us or to limit damage if it was something that we were favorably disposed toward. So my ambitions were much more modest than trying to flip somebody and
I
convince them.
suspect how politicalized the issue is may have something to do with whether or not you have an impact on the final legislation.
Whether it's even susceptible to that kind of movement. Yeah. I think we have time for one final question, if anybody has one. All right, so before I relinquish the floor, am I going to turn it back over to you, Kevin, when I'm done? Any final parting comments from any of our panelists? I want to thank you for being here, but any final words to share with the group before we adjourn?
You did a great job.
I just talked, I didn't have to answer that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating, and what a great job of moderating. So I just have a couple of things I want to tell you before you leave, and I have to make sure I remember them all. One of them is, why are you laughing at me? No, it's not that long. One of them is, Kathryn mentioned the Supreme Court session when you were talking about field hearings. The Supreme Court is holding a normal session of the court on April 1st, no jokes about the date, on April 1st in the Lead Center starting at 6:30 and going till 8. They're going to hold hearings on 2 cases. It's their regular docket. So if you want to see how the Supreme Court works, a little different than congressional hearings, but you also get interrupted a lot with questions, that's your opportunity. So I thought I'd fill in the details for that. In the upcoming months, we are going to have 2 gallery lectures, that is, presentations around the material that you can see in the gallery tonight. They both look fascinating to me. On March 27th, we will host Richard Graham of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Richard is going to be talking about the government comics collection. The jokes just write themselves. The government comics collection, the effort by the government to use comics to convey information. They have a big collection at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and Richard is going to come and talk about that, and it should be just fascinating, in my opinion. And then on April 26th, the KU debate team will be here to hold a mock debate. I hope you know that the KU debate team is a repeated national champion in debate. And the library is their practice court. It really is. And government information is vital for what they do. So they're going to come here and hold a mock debate for you to see how they do the amazing things that they do. Both of those lectures will happen right here, March 27th, comics, April 26th, debate. Sarah, what time are those lectures?
The March 27th is like 2 or 2:30, I think, and 2 o'clock, and you had a little card on your seat. You might look at the card. What? 9:30.
There is a card, the white card that was at your place, has all this information. So the last thing, or the second to the last thing I want to remind you is that curating these exhibits is tremendously time and labor intensive. And it gives me an opportunity to encourage you to support the KU libraries. There are a couple of ways you can do that. One is to join the Friends of the Library. The Friends of the Library is a wonderful organization, partly because the support you provide to the libraries is support to every single student and faculty member at the University of Kansas. So it's really important to become a member of the Friends of the Library. You help the university reach its goals of supporting student success and enhancing research that transforms the world. So how could you do better than that? The other way that you can support the libraries is tomorrow. Is that right? One day, one KU? It's tomorrow. One day, one KU is tomorrow. That's a chance to make contributions there. Every unit of the university will have a web page as part of One Day KU, including the libraries. We all have matching challenges. It's a lot of fun. Last year it raised the largest one-day total that has ever been contributed to the University of Kansas. So we encourage you to go in. The most modest gift makes a difference. Some of our challenges are based on the number of gifts that we get. So even if you contribute $5, it can make a huge difference because it may be matched by hundreds or thousands of dollars. So please do look at the One Day, One KU, and you can just search that and it will bring up the website, and consider making a contribution. The last thing, the very last thing, besides to say thank you one more time, is to tell you it has started snowing. The steps leaving the library, I'm told, are quite slick. Now, we've had somebody out there with a shovel. Other duties is assigned for our librarians. We have had somebody out there clearing off the snow, and we did call maintenance, and we think they've come and put sand down. So hopefully it'll be getting better. There are railings. Please use them. Please be very careful as you exit the building. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and please join me in thanking one more time Reggie.